Hi everyone, I'm Gemma from Concrete Gems Crochet and I'm back in 2025 with some more exciting crochet projects for you. I decided that I wanted to do a temperature project this year, so not necessarily a blanket, I haven't quite decided, but I had the idea to do a Tunisian Crochet Entrelac project, and I haven't quite worked out all the details yet, so I'm gonna work it out with you guys as we go along, and I'm really excited. I can't wait. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Okay, so let's now think about what we need to decide to make our temperature project, blanket or shawl. I still haven't decided what I'm going to be making for mine. But there's some other things that we need to talk about first, as you can see on the screen. So we need to decide first if we're going to be using Celsius or Fahrenheit. I'm in the UK and we use Celsius, so that's what I'm going to be using. You then need to decide what location you want to record. So do you want to have your hometown where you're living now, a place that's got some particular interest for you, or what? So I'm going to use my hometown in the UK, and then the next thing we need to think about is what temperature we're actually going to look at. Now, I've looked at this for quite a while before I made a decision. So you could use the minimum temperature, you could use the maximum temperature, or you could use an average. Now, all the websites I looked at, which gave historical data as well as data going forward, gave the minimum and the maximum temperatures, and that was fine. But for an average temperature, I really struggled to kind of find what they were averaging. So were they averaging all of the temperatures throughout the day and then dividing them by the number of hours, or how were they doing it? Just taking the minimum and the maximum for the day and averaging that. So I decided in the end to go with the maximum temperature. And I adjusted my temperatures, which you can see at the side, with the colours accordingly, so that I hopefully will cover all of the colours in my project. So next you need to think about what yarn you're going to use. So you don't want anything too expensive because it might end up being a fairly large project potentially. I mean, I'm trying to make mine really small, and if you're doing the same following mine, then you should be all right. So I've got the colours on the side that you can see here where it says below one Emperor. Emperor is the colour that I'm using. So I've gone with Starcrest Special DK because it's a DK weight yarn, a light worsted category 3, which is easy to work with, and it's not going to be too bulky. It's not going to make a massive project. It's acrylic, so it's fairly easy to use, and it's also not very expensive. So that's why I chose to use that yarn. And also I had some in my stash, so I wanted to use some of those colours. I needed to buy extra, but I did use some of the ones in my stash, so that was good too. So the colours I've chosen, you can see I've divided it up into the temperatures that we tend to have throughout the year in where I live. And I've had about 3 degrees for each colour. I chose to use this many colours. I wanted to get quite a range of colours, so I've gone with 9, is it 9, 3, 6, 9, no, 12 colours. So I get quite a lots of colours on my project. And I used a range going from reds and oranges for the hotter colours down through the yellows, blues, and then purples for the very cold. And you can use any colour, it doesn't matter. You don't have to use colours that represent the temperature, but that's what I chose to do for this project. And then you need to decide what you're going to make, and that is something that I am not quite sure about. I know I'm going to use Tunisian Crochet Entrelac, and this is an exciting thing, and we're going to do it together. So this is what I'm excited about. We're going to work together on this project and see how it comes out, and I'm going to keep you updated throughout the year how I'm getting on. So we're going to start in a minute, and I'm going to show you the process for doing Tunisian Crochet Entrelac. And I'm going to be doing one little tiny block per for each day. So there'll be 365 days blocks for my project. I think it might be a shawl. But we're going to see. Because they're only going to be tiny little blocks, like 1" by 1" wide, so it shouldn't end up being absolutely massive. So I'm going to be using Tunisian Crochet Entrelac. As I said, I'm using category 3 yarn, so a DK, which is a light worsted, and I'm going to be using, so because it's Tunisian crochet, I'm going to be using a larger hook than the hook you would normally use for not regular crochet. So for a light worsted, you'd normally use like a 4mm hook, but I'm going to go a bit bigger, and I'm going to use a 5.5mm hook. And you probably want to make sure it's a straight hook. It doesn't want to be an ergonomic one, because you can't get enough of the loops on for Tunisian crochet. So just a straight one. One of the old-fashioned kind of metal style ones is probably quite good for this project. And you'll need scissors and darning needle. You might want stitch markers potentially. But apart from that, let's turn around, go down to the table and get started, and I will show you how to do Tunisian Entrelac. I just wanted to show you all of the yarn that I've chosen for my project. I can't even get it in the video, so they're not in order, but as you can see, I've gone with lots of kind of temperature-y coloured yarns. So I've used a website called accuweather.com, ACCU weather, and that gives me the historical data going back a few days, so I can start, and I think it also gives previous years if you need that as well, if you want to do like your birth year or something for somebody's birthday or something like that. So I've looked back, and the 1st of January 2025, the temperature in my town was 12 degrees. So, and then I look at my colour chart, which I've written down. So you need to write it all down, because otherwise you've got no hope, okay? So that told me that it was colour sherbet for 12 degrees. So my first square is going to be sherbet. Now, if you've not seen Tunisian Entrelac before, it's basically made up of lots of little squares that join onto each other, a bit like corner to corner crochet if you've done that. So we're basically going to make one square each day, or you can do a week at a time and catch it up. So I'll show you a few days now. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a slip knot on our hook, and as I said, I'm using a bigger hook than I would normally use for DK weight yarn. So I've got a 5.5mm, and it's a straight one, so I've got enough space to put my loops on. We're not making very big squares, so it's not going to be a problem anyway. So I'm going to chain 7. Okay, and then I'm going to work into the back bumps of the chains and pull up loops. Okay, so I've already got one loop on my hook, and I'm going to turn it around. You see the chain? If you turn it over, you see the back bumps like that. So I'm going to go into the second back bump, yarn over and pull up a loop, then into the next one, yarn over and pull up a loop, into the next one, yarn over, pull up a loop. So I've got 4 loops so far, and you just keep going like that all the way across, and I'll end up with, can I get that last loop? Last one's always a bit tricky. So there we have our 7 loops on our hook. Okay, go down a bit so you can see a bit closer, and then we're going to do what's called the return pass in Tunisian crochet. So you yarn over, and for the first stitch we pull through just 1, okay, so that's like a chain, and then we yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way across. And that's our foundation row. So to do our first normal row, you see these vertical bars, these kind of lines coming down. That's what we're going to work into. So we're using Tunisian simple stitch, and the first stitch is always that loop that's already on our hook. So we go into that bar at the front, and then we yarn over and pull up a loop. And then we continue all the way across, going under each vertical bar and pulling up a loop each time. And then you get to the last one. So I've got 6, I need my final stitch. And for this one, we need to turn to the end, and you see you've got 2 loops. You need to go under both of those loops for this bit. Okay. And then yarn over and pull through, and that is our 7 loops on our hook. Then we do our return pass, and if you remember, the first one we yarn over and pull through 1, and then after that we're yarning over, pulling through 2 each time until we've got 1 loop left on our hook. And that is our next row. Okay, so that was our first proper row, as we can call it, or our second row if you count the foundation. So then we're just going to go again, and we're going to repeat that. Okay, so we're going to carry on now until we've done 5 rows. So that's 2 less than our chain stitch. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're going to do the bind off. So for the bind off, you insert your hook under the vertical bar as before, yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. Okay, and then we just keep doing that as we go across. Keep it nice and loose because we will be working into these stitches later. Okay, and when you get to the end, you want to go into that end 2 chain like we did before. Okay, yarn over and pull through both loops, and then we'll just do a chain 1 to finish and cut our yarn. Okay, so that's our first square. Let's move on to day 2 now. For that, I'm using this grape colour. So it was 4 degrees on the 2nd of January. So I am using this colour for that. And what we're going to do is we've got our square here. We're going to insert our hook into that very bottom square there and join our yarn on. You can join it with a slip knot if you want, or you can just pull it through as I'm doing. You just need to make sure you keep hold of that end. So then we're going to chain 6, so that's 1 less than our original chain, and 2, 4, 5, 6, and then we're going to pull up our loops in the back bumps as we did before. So we've got the first one already on the hook, so we go into that second back bump, yarn over and pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through a loop, and when you get to the end you should have done 6. That's 5, so we've got 1 more in this final. We can get hold of that back bump from that first chain, so that will be 6, and then but we want 7 on our hook, so our final one is going into this loop, end loop of the first square, and that's our 7 loops on our hook. Now because we're joining onto the second square, we don't need to do the chain 1, so the yarn over and pull through 1 this time. We just do our straight away yarn over, pull through 2 all the way across, and then we're just going to repeat what we were doing before, going into the vertical bump here and pulling up a loop and going all the way across, and you'll find that you've got 6 loops on your hook now. So our final one is going into the stitch of the first square again. Okay, then we yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across again. Okay, and that's our second row. So we're going to continue that until we've got 5 rows as we did before. So at the end of each row, when you've done your 6, make sure you get your 7th one by going into the first square there. And then you're just doing your yarn over and pull through 2 for your turn pass. Whoops. Rather than doing that chain 1 to start with. Okay, so now I've got 5 rows. I'm going to do my bind off. So this is the same as with the first square. Go under that second vertical bar, yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook and all the way across. So when you get to the end, you're going to do your final one into the top stitch there, if you can see, of your first square. Okay, and that's what we call an initial square. Okay, so, or a starting square of a row. So if you imagine a row is like this is the first row, and then the second row is here, then you'll end up with initial squares and ending squares, and you'll also end up with sandwich squares as we go along. So I'm going to move on to day 3 now, which is the 3rd of January, and that was also 4 degrees, so I'm sticking with the same yarn. Now if you're changing yarn, obviously you'll need to fasten off and rejoin and pull up a loop into this very first square, very first stitch here, but as I've already got it here, I don't need to do that. So I'm going to go into each of these loops across the top now. And this is why you have to keep the slip stitch join quite nice and loose, because we need to work into them. So that's 6, and the final one is into the very end, okay? And that's a bit fiddly because that's where you had your chain stitch, but you just wiggle your hook around. If you've got a nice pointy hook, that's always going to help. Just going to go through both loops like we did before, okay? So as we're not joining anything on this edge, we need to do our chain 1 here, okay? So we're going to do our yarn over, pull through 1, and then we do our yarn over, pull through 2. There we go. And then this is exactly the same as we have done for all the other squares now. So this is nice and easy. You're just pulling up your loops. So that's my 6, and then my last one is into that end. Make sure you pick up both of those end loops for a nice neat finish. Okay, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way across. So again, we're going to do our 5 rows, and then we're going to fasten this off before we move on to day 4, which is kind of the start of row 3. Okay, so I have now finished this row 2, as it were, so row 1, row 2, and we're going to start row 3, which is going to be my 4th of January. Now on the 4th of January it was 3 degrees, so that is again this colour, this grape colour. So I'm going to join again into here. You probably ought to be fastening off as you go as well. I'm going to show you how to do the slip knot join for this one, just for a change. So you insert your hook, then you put it on the and pull it through like that, and then we're going to chain 6. So this is exactly the same as we've done before. We're pulling up the loops in the back bumps. So you're going to pull up 6 loops like this. That's 5. 6 is the final one of the chain, and then the 7th one is into the previous square. Then you've got your 7 loops. So then we yarn over and we pull through 2 all the way across. And then we carry on like that, picking up the loops from the vertical bars as we've done before. And this is exactly the same as this initial square from row 2. We're just working in it exactly the same way, going into that loop of the previous square and then our return pass, going through 2 each time. So then we're going to do 5 rows of that before we bind off. Okay, so I've done my 5 rows of day 4 now, and I'm just going to bind that off. This is exactly the same as we've done before, but then we come to a sandwich row after this. So the final bind off is going to go into the, where are we, into the first stitch. It's easier to see when they're different colours, but so we're going to go into that first slip stitch to bind this one off. And actually now for my day 5, I'm going to be changing colour, so I'm going to need to cut my yarn here and reattach. It really is a good idea to weave in your ends as you go, I think, with this. Otherwise we're going to have hundreds. So we're going to rejoin our yarn where we fastened off, okay? And we can do it with a slip knot as we did before, or you can just pull it through. It's up to you. So put the slip knot on and tighten it, if I can do that. And then pull it through like that. So that's then our first loop on the hook. Goodness me, getting in a tangle here. Yeah, weaving your ends. Do as I say, not as I do, that kind of thing. So then we're going to start picking up our loops in the top here like this, okay? So this is called a sandwich square. I'm going to get rid of that yarn because it's getting in my way. And it's actually a bit tight to pull through, but that's why you have to leave your slip stitches very loose. So we've got 5 there, 6 into that last stitch, and then our 7th one is going to be in the first stitch of this other square, okay? So that is our 7th loop, and then we're going to do our yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across. And it can be a bit fiddly to start with, but once you get going, yeah, that's pulled through now. And then we're going to do our next row, which is exactly the same as before, apart from we're going to join into the end again. So we'll pick up these vertical bars, oops, not pull through 2. So then I've got 6, and then my last one goes into that stitch there. Do our return pass, and then we're going to carry on like that, going across and then joining into the next square, and then doing our 2 return pass. So you're going to do 5 rows like that and then bind off that square. Okay, so I'm just finishing the bind off. The final stitch of the bind off is going into that very first stitch of the next square. Okay, and then we are moving on to day 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, day 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th of January. So the 6th of January was a what was it, 12 degrees, so that's the same color again. And for this one we are picking up into the tops of these as we did before. So we're just going into the top and picking up our loops. 5, 6. Oops, I've got a bit of purple there. Let's try that one again. 6, and then the last one goes into that end. Okay, 7. So then this is exactly the same as we did for our other ending square or final square. We do our chain 1, so our yarn over and pull through 1 before we yarn over and pull through 2, and then we do our 5 rows and bind off, and that is it really. So I'm just going to carry on like this, finding the temperature each day from AccuWeather, and then taking from my colours that I've written down, taking the right yarn and doing a block each day, making it bigger and bigger. I'll check back in with you kind of once a month or whatever to see how you're doing, and I'll write it all up eventually as well on my blog as a pattern and all of that, but for the moment I'm just going to keep it on YouTube as a video, and we're just going to work on it together. So I hope you're going to join in and do your own. And at some point I need to decide whether it's going to be a big blanket or whether it's going to be a shawl. I mean, I could just keep going, extending it, or I could stop. So if you get to a point where you don't want to make it any bigger, then you don't do the initial and the final one anymore. You just work the sandwich ones, if that makes sense, and then it will get smaller again. And that's really easy actually. So if I decide to do that anyway, I will come on and show you. But for the moment, I'm just going to just each day, not throw my yarn everywhere, do one of these little blocks in the right colour, and hopefully I'll get some more colours than these two, and hopefully it'll start looking pretty cool. So love for you to join in. Please do, and share your pictures. Tag me, Concrete Gems Crochet, and give me a follow too if you like. I'd love for you to subscribe. And I will see you again really soon for an update. Bye for now.